Well, good morning and welcome to the opening day of the Iowa legislative session. Today, I will be signing a proclamation to declare January 2017 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month here in Iowa. This terrible crime has taken Iowa children and adults away from the safety that Iowans value. Iowa is not immune from the labor and sex trafficking trade, and we've made progress in our efforts to combat human trafficking. Last year, I signed legislation passed with bipartisan support to create the Office of to Combat Human Trafficking in the Department of Public Safety. This initiative was the result of repeated legislative actions to create stronger laws to punish human trafficking crimes and to provide better resources for children and adults who have been drawn into a life of modern-day slavery. Our vulnerable youth are at a greater risk of being trafficked. We have strengthened Iowa laws to give county attorneys more options for child in need of assistance options. And our Department of Human Services has worked with the judicial branch to recognize risks and to provide programming that can help our most vulnerable children to avoid trafficking or to receive help when they are recovering from a human trafficker. We are pleased to be able to recognize the anti-trafficking efforts by community groups and state agencies in a proclamation ceremony that will be held in my office upstairs at 9:45 this morning to declare January 2017 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Awareness Month in Iowa. My wife, Chris, also will be recognized today for her efforts with the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking and the youth advocacy group AMP, which stands for Achieving Maximum Potential, to advocate for vulnerable children in Iowa who are at risk of being lured into human trafficking. Chris joins hundreds of other Iowans who have donated their time and money to these organizations that are dedicated to keeping our children safe. She has also introduced me to survivors of human trafficking whose stories show that there is work left to be done here in Iowa as well as elsewhere. We're always concerned about the safety of children, but adults may also be drawn into human trafficking and face the same obstacles in escaping from these groups. We depend on our law enforcement and prosecutors to hold the traffickers accountable, but we also count on our schools, social service agencies, community groups, and the general public to take actions to recognize and prevent human trafficking and to protect vulnerable Iowans. Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds has also shared in the efforts to combat human trafficking, and I will let her tell you more about this issue.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor Branstad. And while it is true that we have made progress in our anti-human trafficking efforts in Iowa, we still have a lot more to do. The stories of trafficking victims tug at our hearts. Some people are kidnapped and trafficked. Some are lured into trafficking without realizing what is happening. And some are drawn into trafficking because they feel really that they have no other alternative. At the Iowa Finance Authority Housing Conference last fall, I was able to meet with and speak to Elizabeth Smart, who spoke to the attendees about the frightening story of her abduction and the abuse by sex traffickers. She described the horror of hiding in plain sight. Her captors took her to public places, but no one recognized the warning signs of abuse and captivity until an observant police officer began to ask the right questions and recognized what was happening to her. We hear about similar incidents occurring across the country, but abductions are unusual. Far more often, vulnerable teenagers are lured into sex trafficking. The governor, first lady, and I have had the opportunity to meet with survivors from Iowa who describe how they thought they were signing up for a modeling career or thought that they could trust their traffickers to take care of them, but instead were forced into prostitution and drug trafficking. Regardless of how the trafficking begins, it's important for justice system professionals to recognize and to take action against trafficking. The Department of Public Safety's Office to Combat Human Trafficking will coordinate training for law enforcement officers and will assist the courts and other government agencies to recognize trafficking and to help them respond more effectively. It's also important for the public to recognize the signs of trafficking and to know what they need to do. Community groups are spearheading the efforts to prevent trafficking and to help raise awareness of the signs of trafficking so that officials can respond. I'm pleased to be able to serve as the honorary board member for the Network Against Human Trafficking and to have worked with teens against human trafficking as well. These non-governmental organizations are really focused on making the public aware of the warning signs and urging them to call when they suspect human trafficking or to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We all know that having more eyes and ears available in every single community throughout the state can help government officials to respond more effectively. We also thank the media for their attention to this important issue. Traffickers operate best in the darkness, and there's no better way to highlight the impact of trafficking than through the media accounts that bring to light what is actually happening. We can and should expect Iowans to step forward and take action, and we must find the most effective way to protect Iowans from human trafficking. And it's now, now it would be, we would like to introduce George Blitzos, who is the chair of the board of directors for the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking, and he has been a tireless advocate for Iowa youth for decades. So, George.
Thank you, Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds. On behalf of the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking, I want to thank you both, not only for your personal support of our anti-human trafficking efforts, but in particular for your support of state government's response to combat human trafficking. The network is the first and only statewide volunteer organization devoted exclusively to ending trafficking in all its forms. When the network began 10 years ago, human trafficking was not recognized as a problem in Iowa. Thankfully, that has now changed, and the response by Iowa communities and government agencies has greatly improved, especially in the last few years. The undeniable truth is that human trafficking occurs in Iowa and has been here for many years. As far back as 25 years ago, personally, I learned firsthand about trafficking of Iowa youth as CEO of a large nonprofit child welfare agency, YSS. I've since retired, and this is my new cause. I've offered, back then when I was director of YSS, we offered safety and shelter to Iowa's runaway, homeless, and neglected youth. Back then, what we saw, we called survival sex. It's not survival sex. What was happening back then 25 years ago, and we've been seeing over the decades, was actually these vulnerable youth, runaway, homeless, neglected youth, in fact, being sex trafficked. Since then, the internet has fueled the growth of the commercial sexual exploitation of victims who daily endure terror and trauma while their bodies are sold to fill the pockets of traffickers. This has to end. Today, human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in the world. And Iowa is literally at the crossroads for trafficking, with Interstate 35 reaching U.S. borders to our north and south, and Interstate 80 reaching U.S. borders to the east and west. Drug trafficking and human trafficking routes closely overlap, the businesses closely overlap. However, you need to know this. Traffickers are making more money from human trafficking than drug trafficking. Drugs can be used quickly, but humans, especially young humans, can be exploited for many years. Plus, human trafficking is more hidden from public view, and the traffickers feel safer. They are not brought to justice the way those who are trafficking drugs are brought to justice. And that is why our network against human trafficking is so very grateful to the two of you. We're so encouraged by the support that you have given us, and the way you have advocated for the network and for all of our agencies, and the governor has signed 6 bills to improve human trafficking in the last 5 years. 2 last year. So Lieutenant Governor Reynolds and Governor Branstad, I want you to know how much we appreciate arranging today's press conference, and in particular signing the first ever proclamation declaring January Slavery and Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. You, and also I want to mention Chris Branstad. Chris Branstad has been an advocate for our AMP youth, kids in foster care, the kids that are most vulnerable to being trafficked. Later today, we're going to be giving her an award to recognize her. She's been very humble. She shies away from any spotlight, and it's way overdue. And we really appreciate the advocacy that she has given this topic, this horrific crime, and the way the two of you have put this in the spotlight today. So to help us kick this off, January as Trafficking Awareness Month, we again invite all of you to attend the signing at 9:45 today upstairs in the governor's formal office. We provided information packets. I guess they all have been picked up, but here is one more with information about sex and labor trafficking, the network, our legislative agenda for 2017, plus our network website is advertised in here. It is the go-to place for useful information, resources, and training opportunities. At our website, you will also note that in the last year, there's been an explosion of survivor services. Thank goodness. Last July, the Crime Victim Assistance Division of the Attorney General's Office funded 6 new direct service programs to aid survivors of human trafficking. It's federal funding, and that federal funding also has allowed the state to hire a new human trafficking coordinator in the Crime Victims Assistance Division. As Iowans, as people of conscience, today we call on you to learn about trafficking, to become aware that it's happening in our state, and to report suspicious activity. If you see something, say something. Ultimately, each of us must ask, if not us, then who will help to end this horrible crime?
George, thank you very much.
Thank you.
George, thank you. And also, I want to acknowledge a couple of legislators that have been real leaders on this. Representative Hartzell and Representative Nunn are here. There's a number of other volunteers that are here. Also, former Senator Maggie Tinsman, and a number of people from our Department of Public Safety. And at that, we'd open it for questions on this subject first. Yes, Kay.
In the legislative hearing on this topic last year, some of the advocates said it was time to enhance the penalty for solicitation. Is that something that you think should happen in addition to this?
Well, we're very interested in working with both houses of the legislature to see, as George mentioned, I think I've signed 6 bills in the last 5 years. We're very interested in doing more. We want to try to do things that are going to be the most effective. So that's why we're really looking to the volunteers and the people that are most knowledgeable on what are the types of actions that they think we can take together. And the collaboration between public safety, Attorney General's office, both houses of the legislature and the governor's office, I think is very encouraging. And having volunteers like George, who has really devoted his life to helping youth. And I know my wife is a strong advocate and believer in these kind of programs. So, yeah, we're hopeful more can be done, but we want to make sure that it's something that's going to be workable and effective. Yes.
Governor, as you're probably aware, you probably read the paper, there's been an explosion of these so-called massage parlors or
Yeah.
even neighborhoods like Beaverdale, Ames, all over the state, it looks like. And I don't know that there's been a direct anecdote that's been concerned about that. What about that? Should these places be just allowed to flourish like they are?
Well, we got to find out if they're truly a massage parlor or whether there's human trafficking and other inappropriate activities taking place. So it's important to carefully review and monitor these situations. There are such things as legal massage parlors, and we don't want to do anything to them. But if it's a front for human trafficking, then we need to investigate and take action to prevent that. Other questions on this subject? If not, we'd open it for other subjects as well.
Can you give us your reaction to Patty Walker being named new board of ISP, and why is that historical?
Well, I think she's been a very dedicated public servant. As you know, she'd been the warden at the women's facility, and I think she's very well qualified to be the warden at our maximum security prison at Fort Madison. So I wish her the very best. I think the Department of Corrections has good leadership, and I think the director has chosen the person he thinks will be the best warden for Fort Madison, and I'm confident she'll do well.
Did you catch the lieutenant governor's crud and when you have
No. Well, I think she spent time with her grandchildren, and she had a very bad cough, but it's getting better. And so far, I've had my bouts with health issues in the past, and so far this year I'm doing fine. So I'm very hopeful I get through without catching a cold or whatever you call it.
I would
Yes.
call it crud.
Obviously, tomorrow you're going to give your condition of the
Right.
But I guess what would be your general comment about the legislature opening? Just any kind of general.
Well, I'm always very excited about an opening session, and this year particularly, we have Republican majorities in both houses. We have some very hardworking, dedicated people that really want to make a difference. So I think this could be a historic session. A lot of things that have been killed in the Senate, frankly, the last several years, I think will have the opportunity to be debated and hopefully approved. So I'm very excited. I'm very optimistic. We have some tough decisions that have to be made up front. As you know, the Revenue Estimating Conference reduced the December revenue estimate to below what our, to the point where we have an unbalanced budget, and by law, we have to change it. So the first order of business has got to be to do some deappropriations of fiscal year 2017 to bring the budget back in balance. Now, we've been spending weeks putting that together. It's been difficult. What I've said is there'll be no across-the-board cut. We're going to protect K through 12 education. We're looking at protecting property tax credits and generally not having and Medicaid, and also generally not having furloughs. But there are tough decisions that have to be made, and those are going to be made on a selective basis throughout the rest of state government.
On that topic with Medicaid, the Medicaid forecasting group said, I think it updated it to about $14 million in shortfall. Are the plans for DHS to eat those costs, or will there be supplemental aid for Medicaid?
Well, no, first of all, Medicaid is a big and very complex system, but actually we think the savings in Medicaid is going to be even a little better than we'd estimated. So we had $110 million savings estimated from old Medicaid, and I think the savings are going to be more like $125 million. So we feel pretty good about that. We're not looking at additional spending in Medicaid, well, beyond what was anticipated with the new program, but it's considerably less than it would have been under the old Medicaid system.
What kind of percentages are you telling the various departments about cuts? I'm hearing
It varies. It varies. And that's why I say it's not across the board. Many of the smaller agencies, really, they just don't have, first of all, they don't receive a lot in appropriations. And so there's probably not going to be a significant impact there. And some may be no impact. Others may have, 1, 2, 3, up to 4% change, but it varies. And we tried to be very careful and to set priorities and not make the mistakes of the past of doing massive across-the-board cuts like Culver did in 2009, which was a 10% across-the-board cut. It hit school districts, which get the biggest chunk in state revenue, and it hurt and made a lot of, it just caused a lot of disruption. We don't want to do that, but we know we have a legal responsibility to see this budget's balanced for this fiscal year. And we're going to submit a budget, a full 2-year budget for fiscal years 2018 and 19 as well tomorrow.
Will there be any surprises in your speech tomorrow?
No.
And do you feel sentimental about doing your last speech after all this?
Well, yes, I feel sentimental about the honor and the opportunity to serve the people of Iowa as governor. I'm very appreciative of having been able to serve so long, and I want to do the very best I can do every day that I'm here. I don't know for sure when the confirmation process will be completed, so I will work hard every day, just as I have in the past, right up until the time. And I feel very confident that Lieutenant Governor is as well prepared as anybody has ever been to take over the responsibility. She's been a full partner, and she's been in all the budget decision-making, all the program decision-making. She's led the trade missions. She's led the STEM efforts and just recently helped put together the energy plan for the future. And so I think things are going to be in good hands.
Secretary, would you like to stay through the end of this session?
Well, I don't know. I guess I understand that once I am confirmed, I then need to resign and go to China, okay? But I don't know. I don't know how long that process, we're still working on the paperwork. We hope to have that done by the time I go in for the inauguration, but then they have to have time to review and analyze it. We have paperwork for the transition team, for the State Department, and for the FBI. So we have 3 different groups, and some of it duplicates. First of all, that's something that needs to be reformed. It's way, way too extensive and duplicative. And I actually talked to Governor Perry about this, and as you know, he's been nominated to be the Secretary of Energy, and he says the same thing. So we hope that our experience is going to help convince the federal government they need to change this system.
Are you taking any staff with you from?
Well, that remains to be seen. There's 2,000 employees of the embassy. Many of them are professional people that work for the State Department, but the ambassador has an opportunity to bring a few people, and I don't know exactly how many at this point in time, and so that we'll find out. We're trying to learn as much as we can about that. Chuck Larson Jr., who was ambassador to Latvia, he's been really helpful. He and his mother have helped Margaret, my executive assistant, with a lot of the paperwork, but they want to know everywhere you've ever worked, everywhere you've ever lived, every investment you've ever made, every organization you belong to, and not just, they want to know when, where, how much, and all the times, and it's a horrendous amount of stuff to put together. Anyway, that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Secretary of State Paul Pate introduced a voter ID bill
Yeah.
last week. I'm not asking about the merits of that particular vote. I know you said that it makes sense to have voter ID. That said, student leaders from the 3 public universities released a long statement in part criticizing a portion of the bill, in part because it doesn't allow school-issued IDs. Other states that have introduced voter ID do have that portion that allows the school issued IDs. Does the bill need to be tweaked?
Well, first of all, we always reserve judgment on any bill until we see it in its final form. So I have confidence that the legislative committees will review this in detail and work with the Secretary of State, with the county auditors in perfecting the bill. And my staff will continue to monitor it, and we want to try to make sure that we pass something that's workable, that protects the integrity of the voting process, and something that makes it as simple and easy as possible to register and to vote legally.
Students be able to use their school issued IDs?
Well, one of the big concerns is people voting in two different states. And this has happened in a number of occasions where somebody that's a student, could choose to vote in their home state or vote in their school location. So they have that choice. So that's a reason why you got to be really careful about the way you do this, to make sure you don't have a loophole that makes it possible for students to vote in more than one place.
Time for two more, Joyce and Green.
Back on the embassy, like supervising the staff of 2,000 people, will that be one of your main challenges?
Well, yes, a lot of these people are professionals that have had considerable experience there, but it's an embassy that has 2,000 employees, and I think that's the largest American embassy in the world. Plus, there's 5 consulates throughout China, and China is a very big country, the largest population in the world. So it's a big responsibility, and obviously my responsibility is going to be to oversee the embassy and implement the policies of the President of the United States.
Green?
Governor, do you think it's financially responsible to move forward with the voter ID killing that could cost $1 million or more when the Secretary of State said things like Bill County are on the table?
Well, I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration as the legislature reviews this. I think protecting the integrity of the voting process is extremely important. We don't want to have fraud. We don't want to have people that are voting multiple places, or people that are not eligible voting in Iowa. But we want to make it as easy as possible for those people who are of legal age and meet all the legal requirements to be able to vote in Iowa.
Do you think it's worth the financial investment though when they've come to you and said, we need a budget increase or we might not be able to do that?
Well, again, the Secretary of State has made a request that we'll make our recommendations tomorrow, and then both houses of the legislature will review those and determine what they think. But the way our system works is the Secretary of State does have the responsibility to oversee the elections, and they make the request, and then the governor's office makes its recommendation, and then the legislature reviews that. And we have to do that in light of the financial challenges that the state is facing, which are significant. So we may not be able to do everything we want to do right up front. And maybe some of this stuff can be accomplished, maybe not this year, but next year before the 2018 election. So the budget I'm going to present is going to have action on de-appropriations in fiscal year 2017, a year that's already half gone. And I'm going to be recommending a full 2-year budget for 2018 and 19. And so then the legislature will have to review those recommendations and determine how much is appropriate to allocate to the Secretary of State's office and other agencies during that period of time.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay, thank
See
you.
all upstairs.